the kind of stuff that I like to write, it's a little bit acerbic. There's always a little bit of a bit of bile in it, just because that's what I like, and that's what I write.
Okay, that was from a Mike White interview I did back in 2006. Last night I just watched the finale of season 3 of White Lotus, and I was blown away. Mike gets better and better every year. So I did about an hour interview with him for the movie Heckler. There's a link in the description to watch the movie. So I wanted to put together 20 minutes for you to see from the interview. And Mike has some pretty insightful things to say about his process, and I think you're going to enjoy it. I also want to thank Jamie Kennedy for being my partner in making Heckler and a good friend. So enjoy Mike White.
How would you define a heckler?
A heckler?
Yeah, somebody who heckles. It's a heckler to you.
Well, I mean, as it relates to hecklers?
Yeah.
I feel like a heckler is somebody who is wanting to get in on the action, who wants some attention of their own, and by, I don't know, being disruptive or like a crank, that they can somehow steer the party toward them.
How would you define a critic, then?
A critic is somebody who has a real passion for whatever the medium is that they are reviewing, or, and can come at it with a whole different, any number of different attitudes or, like, motivations.
You said that you read disturbingly hateful responses to your work. But in a way, can't you see that as sort of a positive sign that it's affecting some people?
Right. Well, it depends on what you've done. But, like, with certain things, like, I don't approach everything trying to necessarily win a popularity contest and know that, like, there's going to be, it might maybe divisive or have, like, polarizing reactions, and that because of that, you have to take the good with the bad. And if people were just sort of like, yeah, it's cute, that's almost the worst, is when, like, people are like, yeah, it was really cute. And you're just like, really? I spent a year on that, and that's the response. It was really cute. Okay, forget it. Start over.
So you're directing now, and we interviewed Peter Guber, who said that the buck stops with the director, and that the director's to blame for a bad movie, even though an executive may have given him, like, shitloads of bad notes. Do you feel, having directed, that you really were, like, completely in charge of the whole affair?
Well, in this particular situation, I feel like I was in charge. So if the movie sucks or people don't like it, it's certainly the buck does stop with me. But, like, in general, I think that's, like, a very sort of tricky definition, because I don't think that, like, always directors do have the final say in what is put out there, or, especially as somebody who's spent, my career as a screenwriter, you do feel like there is some ownership of the movie that you can take either credit for or blame.
You Googled yourself? What was that like?
I don't know, every so often, in just a fit of, like, either boredom or self-loathing, I'll go onto, like, the IMDb, or, like, you Google yourself and you go into one of those chat rooms and they have all the different people who've, like, posted comments about either stuff you've done or you. And it's always a big mistake. When people don't have to be accountable, or don't have to put a face to it, or don't think that, they can just kind of, like it is a bathroom wall, like, the kind of comments it's not constructive criticism. And some of it is just, it's like a window into the dark psyche of the popular culture.
You said that confidence in the early stages of screenwriting of a project is a delicate balance. What have you found has derailed your confidence?
I used to be more freaked out by criticism of my own stuff. Now I find I get more sidetracked by, like, positive, enthusiastic responses to other people's stuff, and I'm like, what is that? Like, why are people going crazy over that movie? And then go check it out and be like, is that what, like, in order to get, like, all the hosannas from, the critics, do I need to do something like that? And it's just like, you know, you have your moment where you're like, I can't make that, so, oh well. But, like, you know, you have those, you know, momentary hiccups where you're like, you're on your own track, and then you, like, see, like, all of the glory and the you know, the flag waving and the, like, you know, people, you know, screaming the praises of something, and you're like, maybe that's something over there I should go check out, you know. The kinds of stuff that I like to write, it's a little bit acerbic. There's always a little bit of a bit of bile in it, just because that's what I like, and that's what I write. You know, like for me, like the hallmark of the kinds of stuff that I like and do is ambivalence toward the characters and toward the thing itself, and I think that generally there's more of people like things that are a little bit more flattering of humanity. And so things that are a little bit more have, you know, kind of that import of like, you know, a man facing the elements and, you know, like macho cheese or like just, you know, or just things that are sort of like, yeah, have a little bit of pomposity or they're about something or, you know what I mean? I think that like critics like to weigh in on, you know, like I think of a movie like Syriana, like where like, you know, I felt like critics were really into being able to write about like, you know, the like foreign policy and oil, and you know, it just makes them everybody feel more like they're, you know, like part of something that has meaning, and whether the movie, like whether I don't, you know, whatever. I mean, it's just like there's a million different kinds of movies, but like it's just for me, you sometimes go, do I need to, you know, take myself more seriously in order to get the kind of critical acclaim that I'm searching for, and then I just can't seem to do it.
Why the Catherine Hepburn voice?
I don't know.
So are you saying like, because obviously when you make a comedy, it can't be as good or important as, you know, a drama for critics. Are you talking about like,
yeah.
Have you ever seen a comedy? I mean, really, have you ever seen a comedy that's has ever been an important movie to a critic, especially like in the last 20, 30 years?
Well, for me, like, I certainly think that like, yeah, no, I mean, I do think that like, for me, I think, yeah, sure. Like, you know, the best movies of the last 20 or 30 years. I don't think for me, like, unless it has a little bit of a sense of humor, it's just not something that it's not going to speak to me. Because that's how I see the world. But, you know, yeah, it's like, I think, like, an Annie Hall or freaking, I mean, there's movies that, like, get, like, you know, people all excited. I mean, because people like to, you know, that's one of the great pleasures of movies.
Okay.
But yeah, I do think that like generally, like I think if you're going to do, you know, if you're just going to go out to try to get good reviews, I think if you stay more in the earnest drama area, you probably have a better shot at getting like people going, this is, you know, important, or this is, you know, this is going to make, you know, the world a better place or something like that.
Your dad, Mel White,
Right.
a gay reverend who appeared on in the eyes of Tammy Faye, talk about a target of criticism. I mean,
right.
You know, here's a guy who's a great gay Christian who had to deal with a lot of critics. Used to write speeches for Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson. Did he teach you anything about how to weather the storm of criticism?
Well, you know, my dad. It's actually a good point. I mean, my dad goes into like the heart of America and will go and make speeches. And when he goes to these colleges and like tries to like, you know, be a positive gay presence on these sort of religious or very just sort of conservative campuses, like he's always met with like death threats, people spitting on him, you know, protesting, and it's like that's like real criticism. That's like really hardcore. And you know, to me, like the kinds of stuff that like, you know, the vicissitudes of putting something out there in this business is, you know, has nothing on that kind of real, you know, the drama of that. And, you know, and he gets it from both sides. He'll get it from, you know, obviously all these Christian evangelicals or just conservative people who don't like gays or their lifestyle or whatever. But then there's also, you know, gays who think he should be doing it this way or whatever, you know, so there's just no way to win, especially, you know, like you look at, you know, politicians, everybody, and there's so many different fields where people have to deal with that, you know, so it's just part of trying to do something. And in the end, like, yeah, you feel like you just have to kind of, you know, follow your inspiration or follow what you feel like you got to do with your life and just kind of suffer the slings and arrows, you know. The thing is, my dad, you know, like he, just like any parent with with a kid is that he takes the reviews way more seriously than I do. So it's funny that like even though he deals with something much more intense, like it's like Roger Ebert didn't like Nacho Libre, and it's like fuck Roger Ebert. I'm like, Roger Ebert's a nice guy. He's always been really nice to me. I have no problem with Roger Ebert. So he didn't like the last movie. Like whatever, I'll survive. And he's like, Roger Ebert's gotta go.
This fellow David Cornelius, who doesn't seem like he's a fan of your work, he writes reviews for these sites, and he gave Nacho Libre 1 out of 4 stars, or what we would call quote unquote total crap. And just to clarify his rating system, he gave 1 out of 4 stars to Justin and Kelly, Kangaroo Jack, Boat Trip, and the Madonna version of Swept Away. So this is what he thinks. However, he gave perfect scores, 5 out of 5 stars, to Snakes on a Plane, Pirates of the Caribbean 2, 4 out of 4 stars for Rain of Fire and Mission Impossible 2. So maybe you're getting a little idea of how he rolls.
Right.
I did a movie, Poor White Trash. He gave it a 2.5 out of 4 stars. So
It's better than Nacho Libre.
it's over twice as good.
2.5 times as good.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not the first person I've like. There's one like post on the IMDb that's like, the headline was, "Will someone stop this guy from writing screenplays?" And then I like, double clicked onto it, and it just listed all of my movies, and it said, "Need I say more?" And then I was like, "Who is this guy?" Like, so I like went and like tracked it down, and then like I just realized that this guy does not have a nice thing to say about pretty much anything. So, but whatever. Like for me, like that to me is like a heckler. That's a heckler. It still bums you out to hear that somebody is so against everything you've ever done. You get that on the street where it's like, when Chuck and Buck came out, like somebody was like, "Hey, Chuck and Buck," and then like waved me over, and I was like, "That's the worst movie I've ever seen." And I'm like, "Cool. No, it was a good movie, but it's like the worst movie I've ever seen, And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." If everybody wanted to go see Chuck and Buck, it would have been a $100 million movie instead of like $1 million movie. The truth is like, like the kinds of movies I see and the person that I am is like, I'm a true freak. I'm totally not in the mainstream. I'm not like, that's what gives me the impetus to write the shit that I do, so I'm not going to cry about it. At the same time, I can't cry about it when, like, a big section of, the movie-going public doesn't really want to see it. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you don't like my stuff. Like, I didn't make it for you. In fact, like that, there's a part of it that's, like, trying to subvert the kinds of stuff that you like to see. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, like, for me, like, it's just... whatever. You gotta take the good with the bad. One day they're your heroes, and one day they're your, they're coming to get you. And it's like, and for every, like when Chuck and Buck came out, there was a reviewer for for Entertainment Weekly who wrote this like, passionate, like really beautiful review of it, and like really like started like the sort of, like to make sure this movie got out there, got seen, like a real, truly like was a part of the whole experience, because they just really went out there and said, this is the best movie of the year. They named it. And it was like, and so, and then that guy at the same time, shit all over another movie. You know what I mean? It's like he hated Nacho Libre. He gave it a D+. And it's like, so one day they hook you up, and the next day they take it away. And for every time they, punch you down, they may be helping some other, filmmaker who needs to get their movie out there. And so like, but to me, it's like, it is about the writing, it's like if there's somebody's a really good writer and they have, they come at it from an original point of view, and they have, like, it's like, I'm all for it. Like my whole life I was waiting to get, totally creamed by the New Yorker in a really like exciting, review. And so then when Chuck and Buck came out, for some reason, like, there was like it was like the shortest review I've ever seen in the full body of the actual, like film review. It was like David Denby, and it was like literally like, people have been saying this movie is good, so I went to see it, and it sucks. And it's like, and it's about, it was the sentimentalization of stalkers. And I was just like, oh my God, like, how is it that like the New Yorker review is like literally like one of these, it's like one of these, internet reviews, like, and it's just like, so I had to like write David Denby, and I was like, dude, I forgive you. I just wrote, I forgive you. I sent it in the mail. And then he wrote back, was like, I'm not looking for forgiveness. I'm looking for a good movie and blah, blah, blah. And if you've ever been stalked, you would know that, like, this is not something that you should be writing about. And I was like, dude, first of all, I didn't write the movie. And so, like, I was like, so then I wrote back, I just wrote, kiss my ass. And then he wrote me again. And I was like, after a while, I was like, this guy's going to start stalking me. But, you know, like, to me, the kinds of reviews that you're talking about, like the David Cornelius's out there, like, to me, if you're going to spend all of your, you know, just like as a writer, like if I'm going to spend my whole life dedicated to one thing, which is to try to write movies that, like, I feel, you know, are meaningful to me, then, you know, to me, the only way I can hold my head high is if I, like, come at it with as much, like, you know, sincerity of purpose and, like, intelligence, and try to do something original, and try to do something different and not be a hack, and, you know, do it as best as I can do it. You know what I mean? And so that's my challenge to, like, the David Cornelius's out there. It's like, if you're gonna like actually spend all your day reviewing movies, you know, it's like, you know, I would just, you know, and it sounds like, you know, even though, I mean, now you give the bigger blurbs, it's like, well, you know, it's like, it's more than just horrible. He's saying, like, whatever, he's trying to get it, like, a, you know, a fully rendered opinion about, like, whether the movie, you know, like, the movie's trying to irritate and it succeeds or whatever. But it's just like, you just wish that, like, the thinking person's criticisms can actually be the rule and not the exception. Obviously, Chuck and Buck, whether you liked it or not, there's some thought in there, there's ideas in there. Like, engage those ideas, engage the movie making itself, and then come out wherever you want to come out. But, like, you know, it's like, I know that this movie is smarter than your review, so, you know, like, let's just give it a little bit more thought. You know what I mean? I've read bad reviews of my movies where I'm like, wow, that actually is a point, something that I can, you know, like, chew on. But, like, that's so rare, you know what I mean? You know, you read certain reviewers, like, you know, and I'll say, like, whatever, like a Richard Schickel or David Demi, and I read their reviews and see what they like and see what they don't like, and also see the kind of, you realize the kind of person they are through the reviews that they write. And it's like, you know, like, I don't, you know, after a while, I don't care. It's, you know what, it's funny, this is weirdly, I just realized that this is something, I actually, when one of my movies came out, I saw, like, an obituary in the New York Times of some New York, it's not even, there was, like, a critic that wrote for the New York, I don't know, it was an obituary in the New York Times of this famous film critic, and it was just so funny to me. It was like, it's so, like, encapsulated a certain kind of critic mentality. And this is the last paragraph of his obituary. Always a prolific critic, he cultivated a reputation for savage reviews. He once reviewed a young poet's first collection 3 times, once under his own name, once under a pseudonym, one anonymously, each time negatively. All right, so I'll say it again. He once reviewed a young poet's first collection 3 times, once under his own name, once under a pseudonym, once anonymously, each time negatively. Which, like, to me is like, okay, that's a crazy person. You know what I mean? Somebody who, like, takes a young poet's first book of collected poems and writes 3 separate reviews, one under his name, one under a pseudonym, once anonymously, each time negatively, is obviously a person who's crazy. Like, it's like someone who's so, like, fueled by something that's dark and negative that they have to, like, crush this, like, you know, like, to me, it was just like, in those moments, you just go, okay, well, that's a certain personality type, and it's like, what are you gonna do?
It's worse than that. It's like, a poet, just like a screenwriter, has a sensitivity, may have a thin skin.
Yeah.
He may stop. That may be it.
Yeah.
No mas.
Exactly. You know, there is definitely, just like, you know, there's certain screenwriters that are fueled by bile and, you know, like, want to put out the most, like, darkest version of the world and humanity out there. But, like, you know, there's definitely critics that are just straight up, you know, nasty, you know, dark hearted paintball, I think. I mean, like, that to me just says it all. Like, a guy who just, like, you know, has a lot of time on his hands to, like, go out and try to shit on people's, you know, stuff. And I don't know. I don't respect it. Some of the reviews that I've read were like, this movie sucks and this is all, you know, like, and he looks like a Dr. Seuss character and an albino freak and blah, blah, blah. It's just like who is that person who's, you know, it's just like, eh. And this is done. Proofread it and send it off. It's just like, it's to me, it's an impulse that I just don't necessarily understand. At the same time, like, some of the things that I've written, you know, they definitely have like a slant, or like they're trying to get, you know, they're trying to like subvert a certain kind of, you know, whatever, like a certain kind of personality type or whatever, you know, so it's not like I'm like, you know, Mr., you know, like Zen master. I mean, I realize, like, you know, like we all have our, you know, I'm a hater. I can be a hater of a lot of stuff.